Let's start our deliberation. So I welcome you all. Now today we have with us Professor Brijesh, Dr. Aditya. We have with us Farahat Ali and Mohammed Awais. The discussion of this particular session will be around the theory development. Theory कैसे बनाते हैं, क्या-क्या क्वेश्चन होते हैं, इसमें बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस हैं. तो फराहत ने ये इनिशिएटिव लिया कि हम इस पे बात करें एक बारी थ्योरी से रिलेटेड और कुछ 9-10 कॉमन क्वेश्चन ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ ऑल द पार्टिसिपेंट या रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स फराहत ने नोट डाउन किए हैं. और नाउ आई विल रिक्वेस्ट ब्रिजेश सर आप शुरू कर सकते हैं. आपने जो भी इनके आंसर्स आप पुट इन करना चाहें.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I'm just turning off my video so that I can conserve my bandwidth. And kindly let me know if I'm able to see my screen properly. I'm just starting the screen share.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So
yes,
I hope all of y'all can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
So yeah. So these were actually the 10 questions around which the discussion is going to be centered today. I hope I'm very clearly audible to all of you. So yeah, so thank you so much. So we are basically going to talk about, first of all, at what stage when we write a paper or a thesis do we actually talk about theory? How do we talk about why should we go for merging two or more theories? And then we will talk about what is a conceptual model, how do you write a theoretical contribution, and so on. So let me just quickly run you through some basic slides which I came across on the same topic. So this is one of the, yeah, I hope everyone is able to see the screen clearly. I'll just minimize this. Yeah. So this is a very simple slide which talks about from what is theory and why theory in research. So theories are basically for explaining, predicting, and understanding the phenomena. Now, whatever we are trying to do research on, any particular topic, this particular phenomena, obviously, why we do it? Because either we want to challenge or extend our existing knowledge. And obviously, every theory has got some what we call as critical bounding assumptions. So what is a theory? A theory, now theory is a word we use in social science, as we all know. Law is something that we use in pure sciences because law is something which is universally applicable, whereas theory is something which is very subjective and which is typically used in social science, which is very analogous to the laws that we have in pure sciences. So when you talk about any theory framework, it's basically like a skeleton of a human body. It's a structure that holds or supports the entire study. So it's like just the skeleton that we have in a human body, how it keeps the entire structure of the human body intact. So that is the role of basically how theory will be used to develop the theoretical framework. And when you say a theoretical framework, it introduces and describes the theory, which is why the research problem under study exists. And whatever you can see in blue is basically the source from which I'm quoting all this. So you can see it's a very fun, again, a very seminal article, Meaning of Theory. I will share this, the papers are also available with me. I will share it later. So importance of theory is very, very clear. So basically, whenever we talk about any phenomenon that you want to investigate as a part of your research question or a part of your research problem, so we expect that, you know, there have to be, as a part of the scholarly work, there will be some theory which will be explaining either partially or if not entirely, at least a major portion of what is the phenomenon under your study. So you can see theoretical framework is mostly not readily found within the literature. And that's why, you know, theorizing is considered to be one of the very crucial structures, like as we say, statistics and data analysis. So as they say that data is the new oil. So if I take it to a human body, it's like the blood flowing through. So the data is all around this, but ultimately the skeleton or the structure is what the role the theory has got to play. And these are some of the important points why we talk about a theoretical framework. Because it will help the researcher to critically evaluate. It will give you a connection. It will connect the researcher to the existing body of knowledge. And it will help a researcher to address two important questions: why a particular phenomenon and how to go about the entire thing. And basically, a theory will help you to identify a limit. See, we always try to generalize from a sample or the data that you collect from the given sample. You try to generalize towards the population. But as we all know, practically it is not possible. And that's where, theory also helps us to identify those limits in the generalization process. And when you talk about a theoretical framework, it already gives you a set of variables. It already talks about a relationship between those variables and how these variables can influence whatever is the phenomenon of interest that you want to study as a researcher, and how it might vary or how it might differ under certain contexts. Now, I will take examples to run you through all these things. So by virtue of its application, any theory in social science, it is supposed to explain the meaning, the nature, the challenges associated with any phenomenon, often experienced but unexplained, typically in the world that we live, so that we may use this knowledge and understanding to learn or, go for the search of the truth, or what we say, have more informed and effective ways of decision making. So what are the strategies? I mean, this is very straightforward. I mean, you look at the research problem, you try to consider what are the key variables. You can brainstorm, either if you have some subject matter experts, definitely, or you can review the related literature from all the different published databases. You can list what are the constructs and variables that could be identified for your study, and you can review some key theories which will help us to better understand the relationship between these variables. So can we introduce some new variables and some new relationships is the first thing. Can we remove some variables because it is not applicable or it is not contemporary to this phenomenon under study, etc. And what are the assumptions and propositions? So these are the things. So again, whatever is there in blue is typically the sources from where I'm talking. So the theoretical framework is typically used to limit the scope of the relevant data. So because you're going to focus only on a specific set of variables and a specific set of relationships. And this will help a researcher to analyze and interpret regarding the data that is being collected. It will always facilitate understanding of current concepts. It can extend, by extending variables, you can study some new concepts and new knowledge, and you can either validate a theory, you can test a theory, or you can challenge an existing theoretical assumption and critically critique the theory. All these things are possible. Again, purpose is coming from this particular paper, that is research and rigor, how conceptual frameworks will guide the research. So you can see very clearly the reasons for, basically, you can understand, analyze, and design the ways to investigate the relationship among the variables within a context of a social science. So that's what it is supposed to be. These are some of the crucial points that we can look at. Not just studying current problems, but also new problems. I will take examples. I think that will make it more better for us. So these are some important points that I need to actually focus more on. When you talk about any theoretical framework, it may be rooted in a specific theory. And in that case, obviously, then your work is expected to test the validity of that existing theory in the relation to this new context or this new set of events or a phenomenon or issue under consideration. And most of the social science research are actually, the papers are fitting into this rubric or this pattern. However, you may not just always be asked to test a specific theory, as the questions have already come in. You may be asked to develop your own framework, which could be your analysis of the research problem that you are working on or that is derived. So based on this example, it's very easy to understand the nature and function of any theoretical framework, because it is supposed to answer two basic questions. What is the research problem or the research question, number one, and why you are taking a particular perspective or approach towards moving towards finding the solution to this problem. So I'll repeat, what is your research question or problem is one of the fundamental factors that will guide you. towards a theoretical framework, which will be rooted or anchored in a specific theory. And second is what approach or what perspective, like, you can have a quantitative approach, a qualitative approach, mixed method approach. There are different approaches you can take for moving towards your solution. Again, that totally depends on what is your research question or research problem. So when you talk about this, obviously the guiding source will always be a review of literature, because we presume that we have understood what are the variables under consideration, what are the type of studies that have been done on a particular area or a particular topic, what is it that is something new, novel, something that has not been covered, or something that is intriguing, or that is something that is basically an eyebrow raising for you as a researcher, or what you feel may be very, very interesting or surprising for your audience or the readers. So that's where, theoretical frameworks have got a huge implication. So obviously, how do we go about all this? I mean, I really don't want to read the points, because I think I will just take a few papers and try to explain it to you so that it will be more interesting and more absorbing to understand. And basically, when you talk about any theoretical framework, you are actually laying down the foundations for a broader context to understand certain phenomena or certain events or certain issues that you want. Now, the question was also asked, can we borrow constructs from other theories, or can we drop some constructs from existing theories? Can we merge two or more theories? So before I go ahead, first, I will just quickly tell you all about, can we borrow constructs from elsewhere? Yes, I have done this. I will share those papers with you, and I will just explain it also. It's very much possible, because today research talks not just about a particular area. You have interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research, which is very much popular, and actually which is broadening the overall perspective of understanding a phenomenon from different theoretical lenses. So it's very, very important that you can definitely borrow or definitely take constructs from some other theories or from some other domains as well. Because when I talk about management, or typically if I talk about social sciences or the area like marketing, it's not a pure science, it's an applied science. So you have psychology, you have consumer behavior, you have philosophy, you have communication studies, and so many other related fields from where you can actually borrow these theoretical constructs. So again, the source is given at the bottom. So you can see that it's very much possible, very much advisable, in fact, and that's what can add a lot of novelty, and that what can bring a new perspective or maybe a new understanding of something which was previously not looked at from that perspective. And there are certain things which are guidelines, as they say. Many of the professors in foreign universities always say that, never under theorize. So obviously theorizing is something which will not come very easily to all of us as budding research scholars. It takes some time, and you need to sink into your particular domain and understand all the theories, and try to understand what exactly a theory is, which theory is trying to explain what perspective or what approach towards a problem. That also is very important. Like, I will share some examples. If I look at information systems, we have three classical theories. One coming from what is called as AIB, attitude, intention, behavior set of theories. Other is called as what I call as theory of reasoned action. Then theory of planned behavior. Then you have extended theory of planned behavior. Then you have decomposition to the extended theory of planned behavior, and so on. Similarly, you can talk about TAM, technology acceptance model. You can talk about extended TAM. You can talk about unified theory of acceptance and usage of technology, that is UTOUT. Again, in that you have UTOUT 1, you have UTOUT 2, and many versions. What I mean to say is that when you talk about theorizing, it's not something which you can just do a trial and error or mix and match. It doesn't happen like that. It's not like a Ludo puzzle that something is missing, so I'll take something and patch it up. It doesn't work like that. It requires some thorough logic. It requires some thorough reasoning and rationale why you are mixing and matching, or why you are picking and choosing. And again, you can see this particular article, very important article by, explanatory power. See, many of the reviewers, in fact, when I send a paper also, I still get comments that, the theoretical contributions are not substantial. Explanatory powers are not convincing to the reviewers. Why so? So we will explain, or we will try to see some basic examples and try to understand that also, because these are some common areas which I think budding scholars like all of us will encounter at some phase in our research journey. And this is something which is important. And I think we know basically a theory and a hypothesis. Basically, theory is something which has been thoroughly tested. So when you say theory, it's well-established principle which has been developed to explain some aspect in this natural world. And when you talk about a hypothesis, obviously it is something which you are testing, what you expect to happen in your study, which may be supported, they may not be supported, depending on the data that you collect. Again, I'm considering it as a quantitative study or a hypothetical-deductive approach, as we say in research. So when you say about theory, theory is all about something that has been extensively tested and generally accepted among scholars, whereas hypothesis is something that is a speculative, something that is yet to be tested, something that is yet falsifiable. By the way, even in theory, you do find even today, many scholars, established researchers are critiquing existing theories on certain pretext and on certain, not explaining certain context. Like I'll share an example with you. I'll just allow me to just come out of the presentation for a few seconds and explain, just open one of my papers. This is a paper which is again one of a critical paper in the area of digital payment systems, which was written typically during the era of demonetization in India. And it has got, I think, to date around 128 or 29 citations. And in this paper, my dear friends, actually, I have tried to combine two theories. So I'm basically trying to answer the question that can we combine two or more theories, and why so? Can we drop something from a theory, etc.? So moving towards that question, I'll just take you to my model. I hope it's very clearly visible. Yeah. Sir, is it visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah. So you can see here, I am trying to combine two theories. Now, why so? Couldn't I just take one theory? Yes, I could have. But see, that was depending on what was my research question. My research question was to actually identify those factors which are inhibiting, as well as those factors which are accelerating or triggering people to accept digital payment systems. And obviously, this is done in a paper done in the era of demonetization. So because that was my research question, I had to take two different theories. So the upper part of the graphic you can see, which is performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, facilitating conditions, hedonic motivation, and habit. These are those independent variables which are having a relationship with the behavioral intention to use a particular system. This is coming straight from UTAUT2, Unified Theory of Acceptance and Usage of Technology. Okay. So it is explaining all the factors that are towards people to move towards a digital payment system. Now, because my research question also talked about identifying not just the positive factors, but also the negative factors, so I selected an innovation resistance theory. So the bottom part of the graphic, if you see here, as I'm moving my cursor, it talks about an innovation resistance theory, which talks about the traditional 5 barriers, that is usage barrier, value barrier, risk barrier, image barrier, and traditional barrier. So because my research question was that is the reason I took two theories. Now, someone may ask, sir, why did you take UTAUT2? So I have explained that. So I will just go back to the part. So why you take a particular theory has to be very clearly explained. And that's where we talk about that particular aspect. So you can see very clearly, I have explained what are the possible theories that are there. So you can see in the section, we have TAM, we have TRA, we have TPB. I could have taken any of these theory, diffusion of innovation. So why I have taken a particular theory? And again, in that theory, have I taken everything or have I dropped certain constructs? Again, everything has been explained. So very clearly you can see. So this is something which I have explained here. I'm sorry, I took you to the wrong section. So you can see what all are the possible things. So why U-tout 2? And you can see very clearly here, I have not, see, in the those of you who know the U-tout 2 theory, there are actually performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, facilitating condition, hedonic motivation, price value, and habit. There are actually 7 constructs in the U-tout 2 which act as the independent variables. Now, I have dropped price value from the entire study. Why? It is very clearly being mentioned with a logic that price value construct has not been considered in the study because during the demonetization, the government of India had provided incentives to the common man or the common public so that people can move from a cash-based system to a digital-based system. So price value, because it was totally free, considering a price for that particular technology, which a users would afford to pay, is not at all relevant in this context. And that is why it has been dropped, which has been explained very clearly in the section of the theory. Again, why did I not select TAM? Why did I not select U-tout? Why did I go for U-tout 2 is very clearly explained in this section here. And similarly, to explain the negative factors, again, why I have selected innovation resistance theory. And all these parts have been explained in this particular section. So coming back to that question where you were asking, I'll just come back to the presentation. So the questions that were asked is, when you are selecting a particular theory, can I add and drop variables? The answer is yes, you can. Can I add one or more theory? The answer is yes, you can. But everywhere, please remember the rider that you have to explain the context or explain the research question and explain the reason why you're adding or why you're dropping a particular variable. Like I can share another paper of mine, which is on chatbots, AI-based chatbots on travel and tourism, published in IJCHM. It's an A category journal with an impact factor of 10. And in that paper, actually, I took TAM, technology acceptance model. And in that, I added, because see, when I talk about AI-based chatbots are typically conversational agents, which try to mimic human travel agents. So TAM is only capturing the system-specific part. System-specific part means typically it is trying to understand the perceived ease of use and the perceived usefulness of the travelers or the passengers or the customers when they are actually doing a travel booking. It is not able to capture the human part of it. Because when I'm talking to a person in front, I know that person has got emotions, that person can understand my sentiments. Well, I doubt whether a chatbot would really do. So that part is not getting captured in the technology acceptance model. So therefore, I use another theory. I borrow some constructs. I was coming to the part of this, where can I borrow some constructs from a theory? So the answer is yes, you can. So I borrowed some constructs from the uncanny valley theory, typically perceived intelligence, perceived anthropomorphism, etc. And I built the model. So the answer is yes, you can pick up constructs from particular theories and explain how the robustness in the theory or how the robustness in the framework can come in because of the addition of those new constructs or new variables, and therefore new relationships will be built up in the model, and therefore you would like to test them in the given for the given phenomena. So therefore, it is very much possible that you can add as well as drop the constructs. And I think this was the slide I was talking about. Yeah. When you talk about contribution, I think there was a question on contribution. So contributions are very, very high, and especially in higher end journals. If I talk about higher impact factor journals or ABDC A category and ABS 3 and 4-star journals, they will look at basically theory. They will not by no means demeaning the practical implications part of it, but the theoretical contribution is what they are actually looking for. And maximum weightage is given if you can challenge the premise, or you can challenge an existing theory's foundations with obviously some sound rationale along with the data to support you. So definitely such type of research is having a much higher contribution to theory. So, as they say, if you're looking for targeting higher end journals, it's gone are the days when you can just test a theory empirically in other contexts or with some other population and get it published. It's not going to work. You may have to challenge the premise of an existing theory and maybe show the falsification part, or you can look at adding some variables from some other theory, from some other domain itself altogether, or you can look at dropping certain constructs from an existing theory and showing the reasons why you want to do so. So these things have to be very clearly given, and statistically the justifications can be shown with the help of the increase either in the model fit indices or by the increase in, like typically we say, the different indices that we have, model fit indices, if I'm talking about structural equation modeling, or typically the improvement in the R square values, if I'm talking about certain things, or I have different types of statistical indicators for that. But more than that, I think the focus should be typically on the foundation of the theory itself. Can I challenge the premise? Can I challenge the validity of an existing theory? And, if that can be shown or demonstrated statistically, as well as with the help of a sound reasoning and logic, that would really add a lot of value. Again, these are the references for that. And I think there was a question about theoretical framework versus conceptual framework. So this is, again, please excuse me. I'm really sorry if you're not able to see the font. But these are some of the pointers which will differentiate between, because many people confuse between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. And the truth is that there is a fine line of difference between both of them. So a conceptual framework is something which is very narrow, which typically a researcher is utilizing in his or her theory to study a particular. Now, my area of research is very limited to the intersection of marketing and technology. So I will share some examples in that for you, definitely. But a theoretical framework is very generic, a very much broader set of ideas. And conceptual framework is actually narrowing it down and making it, very specific with respect to your study. Another very important point you can see between a theoretical framework and a practical conceptual framework is how well developed it is, how well designed it is, and how well accepted it is. A theoretical framework, being very generic, is very well developed, designed, and accepted. Well, when it's a conceptual framework, it may not be accepted, and therefore it is the duty of the researcher to define the research problem and justify why that conceptual framework need to be tested, either empirically, if you're talking about theory testing, or if it is obviously a qualitative research which talks about inductive approach or the inductive perspective of theory building, then you have to actually show it very clearly, either using some particular software like either NVivo or Atlas TI or MaxQDA for that matter, and actually show how these themes, how these particular things are emerging from the either you may go for a grounded theory approach or any of the qualitative methods, and you can show to move towards the theory building. But again, I am basically too inexperienced, I may use the word correctly, to actually talk about theory building at this stage of my life in my research career. So I don't have the guts, or I have never ventured into that area of theory building. Actually, I am just trying to extend theories or trying to add new variables or drop variables and borrow certain constructs and concepts across different domains and add more value to the body of knowledge is what my small limited area of working is. And basically, when you talk about a conceptual framework, it is at encouraging the development of theory and extending a theory so that it can be useful not just to the theory building, but also the practitioners or the decision makers practically in that area. And, depending on what is the research question, we can look at a lot of things from that perspective. And I mean, this was a small thing that I had to share. I'll just come back to that slide of the questions, and I'll just stop my screen sharing. And if there are any things you want to ask, we can take it from here.